Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by the lovely Lindsey Death. Lindsey is the owner of Dorset Forest Bathing and has a passion for making the natural world accessible and enjoyable for everyone. During this inspiring episode, we dived into the fascinating science-based practice of forest bathing that originated in Japan. And no, you don't need a swimsuit to try it for yourself. I make no secret of my love of trees, but I was fascinated to learn of the myriad of benefits to our health and well-being that we experience when we spend time amongst these beautiful beings. With stories of her children and her own childhood, Lindsey importantly reminds us to approach nature with a sense of awe and childlike wonder and enthusiasm, while sharing some simple forest bathing techniques for us all to try. Hello everyone, and welcome Lindsey, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. It's so lovely to have you with us, and I'm excited to learn more about you. I like to just start by asking my guests to share a little bit about how nature has been a part of their life, whether that's evolved over time, and just anything that you would like to share about how nature's been part of your journey so far.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. I was reflecting on this the other day because you find yourself always saying to people like, "Yeah, nature's been a huge part of my life. I've always felt really close to nature," but I was trying to work out what that really was, and I was very fortunate to kind of grow up with nature on my doorstep, a really nice outlook. House that my parents are still in now, meadows and fields, rivers behind that we could explore. And so that was just a playground, really. And I did all right at school, but I was never really that motivated. I just found it boring, I think. I wasn't that interested in school. I was always sort of staring out the window, and I got really into sports because for me, it was just outdoors was just so much more dynamic and interesting, and where things were happening. And I just couldn't wait for like break time or PE lesson where I could just be outdoors and move around. And it's just so much more interesting than being indoors. And then I suppose that my dad's been quite a big influence. He got very into nature in his sort of middle age through, I think it was, he worked for a big corporate company, and they did some sort of national trust volunteering opportunities for their staff. And I think when we were quite young, he took us away on some of those conservation weekends where you all muck in and eat round a fire and do a conservation task. And that has just become a huge part of his life. He's now a volunteer nature warden for a nature reserve, and he's big into it. So I've seen him kind of, both my parents were quite into nature, but I've seen him really blossom, and so it's a really nice shared interest. But yeah, I can kind of look back to troubled or teenage times and had this really strong sort of draw to the landscape, to sort of being in nature. I couldn't really put my finger on it, and now I've got involved in forest bathing. I'm like, oh, that's what I was doing all along. These times when I just wanted to be on my own, and I wanted to be like maybe with the trees or even down on the ground, and just wanted to stay there for a while.
Yeah, I think it's almost a level of companionship, isn't it? But it doesn't ask anything of you, does it? So it's
totally. Yeah, totally. And I say to people now, I think, nature's there for you. And I never quite know if they understand what I mean. But, if you've got troubles or worries, I have found it to be extremely beneficial in terms of anxiety and things like that. But, going on a long walk and mulling things over usually will help your state of mind. But throughout the seasons, it can really, really help you through and be quite an inspiration.
Yeah, so that's obviously brought you to what you do now, which is your business is Dorset Forest Bathing, is that right? Is that bathing?
Yeah, Dorset Forest Bathing. Yeah, so a lot of people, the term forest bathing is still fairly new in this country. Some people are very familiar with it, others will find it a bit odd, and I think some people don't even really like the term.
Yeah.
So it's nothing.
Do you need your swimsuit, I guess?
Yeah,
You probably get asked that a lot,
I
do you?
do get that a lot, and I actually did meet up with some forest bathing buddies on a weekend away, and we went to a woodland, and there was this ancient well that you could dip in, so you could actually bathe in the woods, but usually it's fully closed. So yes, forest bathing is just absolutely wonderful. It comes from Japan, the idea, although people have obviously been forest bathing and finding positives from nature for years and years, but yeah, in Japan they call it Shinrin Yoku, and it's essentially slowing down in the forest woodland environment, disconnecting from mobile phones and screens, tuning into your senses, and that's all very much for the benefit of your physical and emotional health. So they've found some very specific health benefits. So it's sort of based on science, this is why it's good for you. And then it goes from there, really.
I think I mean I was having a look at your website, and that was one of the things I loved was like I don't know what's the word. A lot of the sort of things around nature, like they do get quite dismissive from certain aspects of society, don't they, as sort of a bit woo woo or this and that. And I love the fact that so much of it was based in nature and has this scientific research base behind it, both studies that have already been done, and I think there's ongoing research, isn't there, that they're still conducting.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still finding out so much. I totally agree with you. So my background's kind of conservation. I worked for the RSPB for quite a long time, and much more of that practical sort of and I almost wanted, when I discovered kind of nature for well-being, it was this whole new world. I was like, oh wow, nature's for everybody, and I was perhaps excited to move away from those more traditional bird watching walks, which I love, but can be a little bit off-putting to some people. Birdie nerdy walks, we used to call them. But and now that I'm in the world of forest bathing, sometimes I think people kind of assume it's very much more spiritual, is perhaps one word, and some people do find a spiritual connection in nature. But for me, it's very much, I like to give people the practical benefits and then open the door, really. And some people, very quickly will sink down into, they want to take their shoes off and dance around the woods and hug trees, and they're very comfortable with that. And other people are happy just knowing the science and knowing it's good for them.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, I guess, from what you were saying earlier, it's a sort of formalization of something that you've always done, like you touched on, like you did it sort of in your childhood, unwittingly knowing that it actually was technically forest bathing, but and it's now sort of it's being more sort of structured and formalized into that intention, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And I have come across people who perhaps don't like the term because they're like, wow, you're coming along calling it this brand new thing, and I've been doing it for years, and why do you need to pay to do it, or why do you need to, and that's absolutely fine. Yes, when I sort of fell into going on the course, I was working for Plant Life at the time, and I had a really great manager, and there were these courses going on, and she said, oh, do you want, some of the other staff are going on this forest bathing course, because it was directly linked to their work, and it was sort of vaguely linked to my work. She thought I could then pass it on some of my events. So she said, oh, do you want to go on this forest bathing course in Devon? And I pretty much knew nothing about it at that point. And it was a week, 2 days of absolute joy and just a revelation. But what I'd been feeling for years and not really being able to put my finger on was a recognized scientific beneficial practice. And in Japan, it's a bit more sort of formalized. They'll have although generally got, quite a forested country and a quite a deep connection to nature that's a little bit more inbuilt in society. But of course, they're incredibly built up in these huge mega cities, and a lot of people very stressful life, overcrowded and pollution and what have you. But they have forest bathing parks in Tokyo. So people might do their 10-hour stressful shift, but then they might say, oh, well, I'll go and do my forest medicine. But it's in the middle of the city, and they'll do this route around the park where they will perhaps sit by running water, because we know running water, the sound is very soothing and calming. Then they might have particular colours in the trees that they look at, and they'll sort of treat it as more of a medicine. Whereas here, I think we're still more seeing it as like such a luxury. If you say to your partner, I
Yeah.
don't know, oh, instead of coming straight home after work, I'm going to spend an hour and a half just sitting on a park bench looking at the way the
Yeah.
light moves through the trees. They'll be like, how indulgent.
Yeah, well that's the thing, isn't it? It's we still have this sort of like almost sort of masculine drive in society, isn't it? That you have to be doing something, and a little bit of being in nature, and what you're talking about is actually sort of just more about being, isn't it? Rather than, and although
Yeah.
there are benefits and you are sort of doing at the same time, it is just, it's a different a mindset, isn't it? It's a completely different approach.
Yeah, totally. And it's quite hard sometimes to explain the benefit of that. But sometimes people come on a walk, they'll book on because, as a treat or to find out what it is. And the fact is, they could do it themselves on their own, but
Yeah.
it's giving themselves the time and then having somebody almost instruct them to
Well, and it,
go, yeah.
yeah, it holds you accountable, doesn't it, as well? Because I think, there is this like, oh, you could do it on your own, but then it's very easy to sort of negotiate out of that with yourself, isn't it? Whereas if you've booked on something, then you're committed to that. You've carved out that time. You'd have to say, oh, Lindsay, I'm sorry, I'm not coming today for,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, people often say it's given the permission as well to go, and obviously I sort of guide them through mindfulness exercises usually. So they might, for example, be, 10 minutes, find a tree that you're drawn to and just sit with it. And that sounds a bit mad, like it's
Yeah.
not really anything. But often people will come back and they've had these wonderful experiences.
Yeah. So that's I mean I love my trees. I've got a couple of horses and I've got a big ancient oak tree in their paddock, and I will, over the years
Oh,
I've sat with him for hundreds of
oh
hours, I
yeah,
think, probably. And
yeah,
he probably knows all my problems better than anyone. But
yeah,
it is, I guess sometimes it's just having someone as well give you the confidence to do that as well, and not
yeah.
feel like a little bit foolish as well, isn't it? That
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I think confidence is definitely a big part of it. And I'd say usually on my sort of group walks, it's 90% women. And
Okay.
though I'm quite confident, if I had a free day and it was a nice day, I'd be quite confident to go off and explore and walk 5 miles on my own and
Yeah.
even stop under a tree for half an hour. But I have found that a lot of women, particularly, but sometimes men aren't as confident to do that. Either they don't want to be in the middle of nowhere, or
Yeah.
say it is a lovely summer's day and we've got mats, we might lie down under the canopy, sort of a little bit away from each other but in a group. Yeah, some people would never do that on their own in the woods because
Yeah.
they'd be so
Which,
worried someone
which
thinks
is,
they're
I mean,
mad.
it's understandable, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, I do wildlife photography as well, and a lot of women struggle with that as well, in the same way that, going off to some of these isolated, um,
Mm,
places, or sometimes not even isolated, just in a town and being on your own, and so yeah, there is definitely having the companionship and support of a group, and you wouldn't have that vulnerability, which I guess is also beneficial in relaxing and letting go of the stress and anxiety, because you haven't got that little sort of low grade level of worry.
yeah, yeah. So it's sort of creating that space for people to be able to, yeah, relax and enjoy it.
Yeah,
And
get more out of it by being more relaxed, in the
yeah, I think
environment.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I really enjoy sort of creating an experience or an event that perhaps people would like to do, but wouldn't have the confidence to do on their own. So one of the most recent group walks I did was a winter solstice, and we were so lucky with the weather because it's really tough in the middle of winter. And we'd chosen the highest point near where I live, and it was a Bronze Age barrow. There's this clump of trees on top of the hill, and the views are
Oh,
outstanding in 360 degrees. But of
oh
course,
wow.
if it's windy or raining in the middle of winter, it's awful. But we had a clear day and we watched the sunset together. So we did a nature walk, read
Oh,
some nature
amazing.
poetry, and it's just providing that some people in the middle of the festive period would really craving that slowing down, having a bit of a reflection on the past year and perhaps looking ahead, but nothing too sort of intense. I'm just sharing it together really, and the sun went down and a whole load of red kites came into roost, and it was
Wow.
just a really
Wow.
lovely experience.
Yeah.
So that's quite beautiful, really.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think more and more there's more and more demands on our time, isn't there? And
Mm.
it is harder and harder to carve out these sort of moments where you're not on your phone, or you're not answering emails, or even when you're not at work, there's sort of an expectation that you are available, isn't it? To even if it's family and friends, and yeah, it's quite hard to switch off. So I guess that's a big benefit of spending time in the forest, is carving out that time to just disconnect from all the busyness.
Oh, definitely. And I
Yeah.
think it works for different people in different ways. So it might be that you're the type of person that needs to carve it out in your diary. And, I'm in quite a lucky stage at the moment where I've got, for the first time in a while, I've got little pockets of free time. I've got young kids, but I've got little pockets where I'm not having to work and don't have the kids. Not very often, but, I'll look in my diary and go, that afternoon, I'll spend 2 hours
Yeah.
in that lovely location. Or it might just be, I know most people are so busy, it might be kind of adapting the working day, just very tiny tweaks. So even I spoke to somebody the other day who said, oh, I start every single morning with a barefoot walk around my garden. And that's just, she does it every day, whatever the
Yeah.
weather. It's just probably a couple of minutes of slowing down, reflection. Or it could be changing your route to work. So you do, even 5 minutes isn't going to impact on your day greatly. But whether it's 5 minutes in a local park, noting what bird species you see or something, the more you
Yeah.
practice, the more you want to do it, or maybe learn a bit more, maybe learn a new bird, or it can sort of filter out into
Yeah.
joy throughout
Yeah,
your day.
I think you mentioned it earlier, but you touched on it there again, is um, that it can be accessible to people, even if you're living in the middle of a town or a city, like you were saying about in Japan, like just going to a park in the middle of the city, you can still get all the benefits. You don't have to make that sort of, if you're not fortunate enough to be out in the sort of rural area, you don't
Mm.
have to make that journey out. Just anywhere you can find a little pocket of green, I suppose, isn't it? Of whether that's
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. And if you read sort of some of the research on it, I was thinking about this over lockdown for people who were in cities and who were, stuck in pretty much one room all day or things like that. Undoubtedly a really tough time. Um, and it sounds really, really obvious or a bit silly, but the research on having plants in your office, just, and I think that boomed over lockdown, didn't it? People having a lot more plants in their home,
yeah,
but also looking at green and green images. So if you can move your room around, say you're looking out of a window, um, or playing, soothing. If you're surrounded by noise a lot and can't go out to somewhere very quiet, then there's all those nature sounds: running water, wind in the trees, birdsong. But actually, I'm not very good at describing the science, but it does stuff in our brain when we listen to certain frequencies that does calm us down and help us feel more relaxed. So it's
yeah.
definitely worth exploring, I think.
I think if I read one of your articles, and I think one of the things that you ask people to do is to close their eyes, and so that you do sort of heighten your other senses, don't you? Because it's
Mm.
quite often we get very reliant on our eyesight, don't we? And
Mm.
experiencing what we see, but actually by closing your eyes, you do just allow a deeper connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You'll often be surprised by what you hear. Just a simple listening exercise. Sometimes I'll be walking along with a group and think, oh, I can't really hear much beautiful birdsong at the moment. Shall I do the listening exercise? And then we stop and 5 minutes, eyes closed, and people will say, oh, I heard a bee buzz right past my ear. Or, there will always be something that's, yeah, definitely heightened. I really struggle with it because I'm such a visual person. I'll try
Yeah.
and have my eyes closed in the woods, but I'll always be tempted to open them because I just love seeing so much.
Yeah, and I guess, but that's the thing, isn't it? Everyone's different. So it's if you are a visual person and that's where you get enjoyment, then it's important to nurture that bit of it as well, isn't it? Just
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so. Yeah. And nature is just such a level playing field. So that's the thing, it is for everyone. Absolutely, you could be kind of a doctor of microbiology or something, or you could have, have very little understanding of nature at all, or very little knowledge. But for everybody, there's different things that you're drawn to. Always different people notice something else, but it is really there for everybody. And I think that's my message. Obviously, I'm trying to make a business out of Dorset Forest Bathing, so I do get paid for the work I do. But my message is really for people that nature is there for you. Nature is free for most of us in the UK. We're fairly lucky that there is accessible green space and wild green space a little bit further away, and to utilize it.
But I think I mean it is free, but I definitely think there's definite benefits of joining groups like yours, and um, just having someone guide you and give you confidence, and also stretch your own boundaries as well, and what you would consider doing. I mean, you might just normally walk in nature, but obviously someone saying, oh, just actually shut your eyes or go and sit with a tree, and it might be things that you've not thought to try or not had the confidence to try. So it's about expanding your awareness as well, isn't it, by being guided by someone like yourself who's a trained, the International Forest Therapy. Is that
There's the Institute of Forest Bathing is one of the big training groups. I actually trained in Devon with Nature and Therapy UK, who I really recommend if anyone is looking to kind of find out a bit more. But oh yeah, I obviously definitely believe in the value of going with somebody. Yeah, there's loads of different benefits.
Well, and even the sense of community as well, meeting like-minded people, because I think we live in an age where, like, on many levels, we're sort of more connected than ever before. Like, even now, like us on Zoom and things, but actually that connection of community and shared interest is also very important.
That's a huge part of it. So one thing is that I do a wellbeing walk every Friday. It's in Shaftesbury, and that's a free thing for people to come along, so it's funded. And that's exactly like you say, the community. It's just a short walk. We look at the seasons, look at the views, but the knock-on effect of other things that have been sparked from it and friendships, it's been far more nourishing and positive than I could have imagined at the beginning. And I don't know if you've seen there's been a few articles and things recently about awe walks. So awe, AWE, and how that's meant to be, the key to happiness is having a sense of awe in your life. And I suppose that's an aspect of forest bathing. And awe is perhaps like a shared experience of something greater than ourselves. So some people get it through religion or nature. So it's that sense of it's a bit grounding, and it's feeling, things are bigger than yourself, sense of perspective, shared feeling where everyone kind of a high feeling. And it's also quite a positive thing to sort of rationalize yourself within the world. So perhaps if you are struggling with lots of negative things going on in your life, or anxiety or depression, it somehow helps, a sense of awe perhaps can help you shift slightly, remind you that there's other things going on.
Sometimes things feel sort of insurmountable, don't they? It's so overwhelming. You feel like, how am I going to get through this? And like you say, like, just being able to sort of, I guess that's the sort of getting out of the busyness as well, isn't it? You get that little bit of a step backwards, and you can see sort of more of the bigger picture rather than sort of when you're sort of locked into the middle of it. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, there's as we said before, there's research going on all the time, and you might be aware there's kind of starting to be more green prescriptions at doctor surgeries. So this is still a fairly new thing. It's up and running in some places. So this is the idea that if you are experiencing mild to moderate depression, anxiety, there could be a few other things as well, I've forgotten as well, perhaps wanting to lose weight as well, things like that, then one option for your GP is to direct you towards a series of activities that could be kind of community gardening or health walks or forest bathing walks. So it starts, and for some people, say you've got moderate period of depression, it might be that medication is needed, it might be that talking therapy is needed. But for some people, and there's a research study going on at the moment, it could be that joining a group, doing an activity like forest bathing could be as beneficial. So I just think, we know that stress is one of the biggest health problems in our modern life, and anything we can do to help tackle that, even early on. You might not feel that you've got any stress in your life, but if you've got strategies in place like friendships and playing sports and trying to eat healthily, but also doing something that helps your mental health and your relaxation, then that will all help you in time when times get tough. I've certainly had somebody that's come onto my walks regularly, and she said, not just my walks, but her discovering nature and forest bathing and her connection with nature. She said, it's been more beneficial to me than pills ever have. So that's fantastic.
I think especially over the last sort of 3 years, with everything that's happened with COVID and the lockdowns and just the pandemic, and sort of the sense of loss and grief and things that people have, there is a lot of depression, isn't there? There's a huge amount, I think, especially actually quite a lot of prevalence in younger people. And so to have this ability to connect to nature and get out into nature, and also, like you said, with the community aspect of it as well, it's really almost like, I don't know, almost more important now than ever, isn't it? And
yes, I think it is. Yeah, a lot of people have said that, and unfortunately, the problem is that waiting lists are quite long for appointments, but then also perhaps for talking therapy type solutions. So
and it's a longer term solution as well, because whilst antidepressants are very valuable, you hopefully aren't going to be on them forever, so you need to put in place those elements into your sort of lifestyle that will also support you going forward, so that you can hopefully
it's those habits, isn't it? Whether it's a habit or not. And I think I was at a gym the other day. I don't go to the gym, but I was walking past the gym and there was a big quote on the wall, and for some reason it really struck me, and it was, motivation is what gets you started, habit is what keeps you going. And it just sort of struck me, it's the new year, a lot of people are like, I need to get healthy or cut out alcohol or chocolate, and inevitably you sort of do for like a few days and then you fall off the wagon. And it really struck me that it's like, yes, the motivation is what starts you. You think, I need to do that, but it's habit. All those people that you hear that go for 5 a.m. runs every day, you think, how do they do it? But I guess if it's their habit, then it's like, it's built in, and it's not that hard after a while. So you've got to build those habits. But
you do. I ran the Paris Marathon quite a few years ago now,
wow.
I used to be that person doing like 5 a.m. runs.
So did it ever become like a normal habit, or was it still really hard every day?
I think, well, when I was training, so I did probably about 6 months or so of training, and it becomes a bit addictive actually, in almost, it's which I guess is also what I find about nature as well. It's like, in terms of a healthy addiction, it's but you start to feel this sort of craving for it. You notice if you haven't spent enough time out in nature, and I think it's that, because that is important, like, and I think that's what's the wonderful thing about groups like yours, is it gives you the motivation, doesn't it, and the accountability and the community to get started, and then hopefully whether you continue with you on a regular basis, but it becomes more of a daily practice as well, beyond just the groups as well.
Certainly, I can resonate to that as well. Just that desire to get out. but sometimes I'll notice if people have booked on a walk and perhaps the weather's looking a little bit iffy, but I know in my mind that it's going to go ahead. And it might be somebody that's perhaps feeling a little bit nervous about it or looking for an out, or perhaps
Yeah,
not that used to going out in all weather. I mean, I do cancel if there's a weather warning, if it's going to
yeah,
be
yeah,
unsafe, obviously. And then in the
yeah.
winter, there's a difference to having rain showers in the middle of summer when you're under a thick canopy, or in the winter. So I do, it's obviously more likely to cancel in the winter, but there's sometimes I'll get messages from people, oh, I'm worried about the weather, or I don't think I'm going to come. Like, no, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah,
if it's not in their habit to get out for a walk every day, they might be thinking, oh, I just can't cope with that, which is
yeah.
fair enough. It's building
It
up.
is it's hard. I had a guest just before Christmas, Helen, who does she does yoga outside up in the North Yorkshire on the North Yorkshire
Oh,
coast. She does
wow.
sunrise yoga, and
Yeah.
we talked a lot about being prepared for the weather and dressing for different weathers, because she does it through the winter as well.
Amazing.
And yeah, it's I think when you've grown up with nature, because I was lucky enough to grow up in sort of nature and being out and about, you're sort of used to wrapping up and getting on with it. But I think for a lot of people that isn't normal, is it? It's like, oh, it's raining, we just stay inside all day, and yeah, it's harder for them. And I think again that's why a group is important, isn't it? Because it maybe gives you that
Yeah.
little extra encouragement,
Yeah. You
especially.
know, people will be there. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we do sometimes have the worst weather in winter, don't we? And if you
Grim.
didn't go out in the rain, you could basically not go out for months on
Yeah,
end.
yeah, yeah. You just have to. You have to find ways. A couple of years ago, I started doing this challenge. It's you can find it on social media. Called 1,000 hours outside
Oh
or
wow, okay.
outdoors. I think it's geared more towards families and people with kids, and that, but
Yeah.
obviously anyone can do it. The idea is that over a year you spend 1,000 hours outside, which
Wow.
works out as roughly, I think it's just over like between 2 and 2.5 hours a day.
Yeah.
Um, and I just felt that really a lot of people can get quite competitive about it. So you find ways to maximize your time outdoors. And actually, this year, for the first time in a while, I'm not counting every hour, but it's still ingrained, sort of like,
Yeah.
well, we'll, walk to the shops and make it a longer walk around the fields, or we'll have
Yeah.
a meal outdoors. What can we take with us to maximize that outdoor time?
Yeah.
And we'll get some outdoor time every day.
And it's I know that's one thing that you're quite passionate about is sort of encouraging young children, aren't you, with your own young children, of connecting with nature, and but also supporting women sort of post or just after birth, aren't you, of mental
Yeah,
health and
yeah, I'd say I'm like, yeah, pretty passionate about sort of perinatal mental health, which is the whole sort of period around pregnancy and after birth. And I mean, I'm passionate about mental health for everyone, really. I suppose it was just a couple of years ago, I was in that group and met so many people that who perhaps had never had any mental health concerns in their life before. And then suddenly they were thrown into a very different experience of having a baby. And yeah, many people who really struggle with that in a lot of different ways. And I think still there is a lot of support out there, but it
yeah,
also can be a very lonely time, or you've lost your life that you had before. Perhaps you were really sporty, or you were really doing a lot of time outdoors, and then suddenly you can still do things, but it's in a different way, and there's different priorities. And yeah, I actually started up a walking group when I had my first baby, because of that. I missed doing the kind of bird watching type nature reserve visits. And my son just didn't want to be indoors at all. He pretty much screamed when we were indoors. So I had him in a sling outdoors kind of all the time. And I was like, well, I want to find other people that want to do this with me. And I was sort of didn't quite fit into the other baby groups where it was a lot of sitting around in cafes because he would just scream. So I started wildlife walks. So and it would give me a chance to kind of do a recce and plan the walk so that other people that were more nervous would know that I'd sort of planned it out. Yeah, that was great. And then I found it was only meant to be something to kind of help me find my tribe, really, find some other like-minded people. But I found some of the stories people shared, more so when you're walking side by side with a
Yeah.
beautiful view, rather than if you're sat in a cafe opposite somebody. Some of the things that people opened up about what they were struggling with at the time was quite moving and eye-opening, really, and found that was a really lovely, safe space for people to come, and quite healing nature,
Yeah.
really.
I think
So,
I know I've sort of looked into like trauma treatments and things, and actually movement is quite important for processing sort of the trauma that you hold in the body.
mm-hmm.
And so I do think, yeah, that and I know for myself, like when I'm walking in nature with my partner, we talk about just quite a lot of stuff that we probably wouldn't talk about if we were just sitting at home, or um or like you said, sitting with friends in a coffee shop. Like you just that sort of action of movement and being in nature, just it does open up opportunities for, like you said, it feels safer, doesn't it? It feels supportive and just allows you to sort of access these sort of deeper levels, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I was quite surprised because when I did my forest bathing training, as I said, I came from more of a conservation wildlife background, whereas most of the other people on the course were therapists who wanted to
Okay.
take their practice outdoors.
Yeah.
So they were already practicing kind of, therapy with clients and wanted to bring it outdoors. And that's sort of shown me how the practice of forest bathing can be a really sort of therapeutic activity, whether it's one-on-one or sometimes in a group. And some people do find it quite an emotional experience, and it's not something it's not something I sort of do intentionally, like, with a
Yeah.
group, like, right, I want everyone to feel really
Yeah.
super emotional. But it's something I'm quite aware of now, and I often might say that at the beginning of a session, because say most of us have got busy lives and various things going on under the surface. And for some people, they might not have been asked to, or might not have had an opportunity to stop, take some deep breaths, and just
Yeah.
try and relax for a moment. And I often find some people find that suddenly those, when they do stop and they've been invited to slow down in a sort of lovely group environment, suddenly they feel a little bit overwhelmed with emotion.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's sort of treading that path and being aware of what people might be bringing
Yeah.
to the session, or they might have, without really giving it some deep thought, booked it in because they're battling something, and that's sort of their time to confront it, really.
Yeah.
So usually it's a really beautiful group experience, but you just have to be aware of some people might be in a little bit of a vulnerable state. And yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a trained counsellor. I've done some mental health first aid, just trying to encourage them, really, that it's a safe space, and that
Yeah.
nature is kind of there for them. But yeah, it's often the place to confront those thoughts or feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's I mean, it comes back to your like women who've just had children as well, isn't it? It's, sometimes we go through like these huge life changes, and sort of society also tells you that it should be the happiest time of your life as well, don't they? Like,
Yeah.
and then you feel a bit of a stigma, don't you, of like, you should be having the most amazing experience, and actually it's a bit tough and challenging.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's very important that message gets out to people, to it's okay to be struggling,
Yeah.
and to that to reach out and ask for help, and not to have feel any shame or embarrassment around that.
Yeah. 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 Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your own two children, I'm sure they've inspired you to explore ways to encourage their connection with nature. From
Yeah, yeah, all the time. Actually, last night we were there was about 15 minutes till bed or bath time. And I said to them, right, you've got 15 minutes. They were watching some telly. I said, so you've got a choice. You can either carry on watching TV or play a game or something. But while we've been having dinner, we've been looking out. I don't know if you'd seen the moon last night. It was really lovely. And so my 5-year-old said, I want to go on a night walk. I was like, and part of me was like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this. It's, just clearing up and it's time. But then I was like, no, it's a beautiful night. Yes, of course. And we'd been on one when the stars were out a couple of weeks ago and taken the telescope out. So I was like, yes, okay. Instead of staying in and playing a game or watching telly, we'll go out and look at the star through with the telescope. We're really lucky. We're North Dorset. It's a kind of a particular dark sky area, so you just get away from the street lights of our road onto a field, and wow, it's incredible. So yeah, we did that.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, amazing.
I just hope they kind of hold on to it as they grow up, because children don't need any encouragement. If you go to a woods or anywhere really, to climb on things and smell things and touch things and get stuck in, which as adults we don't do as much, which I like to try and encourage people to do. But so I just hope they keep that going into their teenage years.
Yeah, I think hopefully they at least know that nature is a place that they can find support, like you did in your own teenage years, and by having built that connection as when they were so young and experiencing it, that they do have that to fall back on.
Yeah, and I suppose the foundations are there, and mine do quite like being outdoors. We went to London recently on the train, and as we left, he said, well, I liked London, but actually I prefer trees and nature. So I was like, yes, thank goodness, that's good, because we're not going to be going to London very often. But yeah, I think it's really important, especially with children, to let them just be outdoors, and it doesn't we don't always have to be taking them to an expensive kind of adventure park outside. Just being outside, whether it's in the woods or in a garden, and have some ideas of activities possibly, but let them explore and let them come up with things and let them
react to what they find, I guess.
Find their own way. I'd love to actually do more with children. People often ask me if I do events for children, and I'm like, no, this is my opportunity to be with adults and be really calm. But like you say, I think anxiety and in children is becoming more of a problem. It's pretty huge, and it'd be lovely I'd like to learn more about ways we can support children to have those techniques. And I hear that they're doing it in schools, and they do sort of breathing techniques, and it's really lovely. I think that's very important.
I think it is important. I think it's great that things like the forest bathing are have got the scientific background behind it, because then it's much easier to get it integrated into sort of the mainstream, isn't it? That the schools and education and even like the medical side, like you said, with the green prescriptions and things. It's harder for people to resist when you can say, actually, these are the list of benefits, because I think it reduces your cortisol levels, doesn't it?
There's so many benefits. I mean, when the Japanese did the research in the late 70s, 80s, and sort of coined the phrase forest bathing, they found a whole range of things. They tested a lot of things, and one of the main discoveries they made was the sort of boost to your immune system of forest bathing. So they found that basically trees give off essential oils that are called phytoncides, and they help the trees fight off infection. But during a period of forest bathing, we breathe them in, and it helps us as well. We fight infection. So and those levels go quite high and stay quite high in your body for quite a long period of time afterwards. So it really is a big impact. But they found it improves sleep for people who are struggling with insomnia, reduces feelings of depression, reduces blood pressure, reducing stress levels. Absolutely, lots of benefits.
And it even improves memory as well, if I remember correctly, doesn't it? It improves your memory and concentration, and I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, what you're saying about like, improving your immune system and like that's just incredible.
Yeah,
It's,
and we're still learning a lot more, aren't we, about, having your hands in soil and things like that. There was a study, I think it was with kids' nurseries, and one was all sort of concrete outside, and the other was soiled, so the kids were sort of touching soil every day, and that was again, I'm afraid I can't remember the exact results, but they were quite a big difference in terms of their children's immune system.
oh wow.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't during this over the winter. You do, yeah. If you've got young kids, you inevitably get lots of viruses and colds and coughs and things. But just anecdotally, I'm pretty sure over the last few years, when I've been doing a lot more concentrated sort of forest bathing type activities and time outside, I'm sure I've been a bit healthier. But yeah, maybe I'm just imagining that.
Yeah. No, but it's I think sometimes even if you get something, you sort of bounce back quicker as well, don't you? There's sort of
Mm.
a greater resilience. Like
Mm.
you sort of you don't doesn't necessarily take you down for quite so long. But yeah, I mean, it's also hard, isn't it? If you're not feeling very well, like you don't want to do anything, but actually,
Yeah,
if you can
yeah.
sort of drag yourself out of your sick bed and
Oh
obviously
yeah,
safely
totally. Yeah.
not around other people, but that just like you said, just sort of walk out in your garden and get a bit of fresh air and sort of speak to a
Yeah,
couple of plants and things. It does help, doesn't it?
it does. And I found that I'm really good at sort of giving all this sort of advice, not advice, but talking about the benefits, and that's all, and the benefits to your mental health, and that's all very well when you're feeling really well. But it's those times when you're feeling really low that actually it's not that easy, and I'm very aware of that. This is what we're talking about is, as I said, sort of mild to moderate feelings of anxiety and depression, but I certainly don't want to come across as someone who's sort of like, oh, we'll just go and sit by a tree and all your problems will disappear. But I have tried to practice what I preach. Sometime recently, I was feeling I had a bit of a cold and I was feeling a bit low mentally, and I could have easily spent all day at home, but like, no, I forced myself out, even just for a short walk,
Yeah.
and it was the day when I saw my first snowdrop. So there's always
Oh,
something out there, a little gift to be
yeah.
offered. But yeah, I know for some people it is just even getting out of the door on some days is a real struggle. But on
Yeah.
those days, even the science shows that even looking at green imagery, so
Yeah.
whether that's on a screen or in a book or looking at old photos of when you've places that you've visited, will do something in the brain to kind of boost, to give you a boost. But it could be also something like rewatching those, make your favorite David Attenborough series and
Yeah.
reminding yourself of some of the facts on there, and it
Yeah.
gives you that inspiration.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, depression is really challenging, and there's it is really hard. Like for someone who's really struggling with it,
Mm.
it is very difficult to find any motivation. And but like you say, just even if it's just looking out of your window, even opening the window when
Yeah,
you look out of it, just to sort
yeah,
of feel, the air on your face and things, or
yeah,
stepping outside your front door, and even if it's not going beyond
yeah,
the boundary of your garden and things. But yeah, I think I loved what you were saying about the little snowdrop there as well, and that's what's lovely as well, isn't it? Is like over time, if you've got a nice walk that you do and you see it change through the seasons, and you notice all
yeah,
these little sort of indicators, oh, the first snowdrop, or
yeah,
the bluebells, or the first leaves, the buds on the trees, or the but different birds at different times of year.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd really encourage people to, if they've got a local walk or a local spot they can visit and notice those changes. The weekly wellbeing walk I've been doing, um, it's been running for just over a year now, so we're starting to remember what was happening this time last year, and then looking forward to spring. And it's like, oh, just under that tree was where we saw that little purple violet come up. I wonder if it'll be there again. Yeah, things
Yeah.
like that give a real boost, I find.
I think they give you a sense of connection, don't they, to something bigger than yourself, and
Mm.
Yeah, and that I think that also helps. It feels like, I guess it comes back to community again, doesn't it? But it's the
Mm.
sort of, the non-human community that you're actually a part of, whether it's your birds in your garden or out in the, where you're walking, or the trees, and there's sort of a
Yeah.
familiarity.
Yeah, I think trees give a great sense of perspective. I've heard people talk about kind of tree time as opposed to human time.
Yeah.
We just see them in a snapshot, but that most of them will be around for so much longer than us. But also, it's that some people feel really drawn to nature naturally, and others don't notice it quite so much. But we are all, we are nature. We're all natural beings, and our ancestors kind of walked this land, and we're surrounded by green. If we're talking kind of a really long time ago, they were very much more connected to the land than we are now. So I feel that that's sort of in all of us, really, that desire.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's some sort of link there in terms of, it's not surprising that if you look at a completely green natural scene, you find it more calming than if you look at a grey concrete cityscape. That's not really surprising, but I think that might, go back to, our ancestors would be surrounded by green, and green means life. And we know that the sound of running water is one of the most calming frequencies. So obviously, if you're looking for water and then hear that noise, it's going to
Yeah.
help make you feel calm, because
Yeah.
it means water. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and
whether
it's
you,
sort of, it comes back to sort of innate survival, doesn't it? Of you need water to survive. So yeah,
yeah,
like you say, it makes sense that like you would find being near water reassuring, because
yes,
yeah,
yeah. I think whether you feel that or not, it's definitely water. I think everyone finds being by a body of water relaxing, whether it's the sea, or lake, or river. Yeah, that can be a really, really powerful sort of environment.
so I mean, obviously it'd be great if anyone sort of in the UK who's local gets an opportunity to come and join you. But if there's anyone further afield listening, have you got any tips for sort of what they could do to just sort of deepen their connection, and sort of explore a little bit of forest bathing on their own?
Yeah, of course. It sounds really simple, and it is simple, really. So, one of the first things I'd suggest to do is find a place that you want to visit, ideally a woodland or somewhere where there's some trees. It could be a regular walk, or it could be next to a river, but find a sit spot. So that's literally a spot that you can sit down in. So, if you go on a walk, if it's, you might want to take a little mat to sit on, or just a plastic bag or something. Find a spot that you feel comfortable. There's no point doing it if you're going to feel really self-conscious and nervous. So it could be that you're hidden away in the undergrowth, really away from the path, if you're comfortable doing that, or it could just be down next to a river, um, and just sit and see what happens. So it might feel uncomfortable if you're not used to slowing down. You might just want to start by giving yourself 5 minutes and just sit there. And I always say, if you sit for long enough, something magical will happen. And on our walks, so I've had someone have a mouse run out near them. Um, something will happen. Well, it might not be, an incredible nature moment of, dragonfly landing on the branch or something, but it could just be a thought, or a leaf falling, or the way the light shifts. But like you said before, it is addictive, because when you take time out, you've sort of got to be there for things to happen. So whether it's an amazing nature spectacle, or just a little moment of clarity. So one of my strongest nature memories, I often ask people actually if they've got a happy nature memory, and one of my strongest is, I'm not sure, I was probably about 14 or something, and we had water meadows and fields behind the house, and I was feeling grumpy, and I wanted to go off and be on my own. And I knew that on the river there were water voles, because people always talked about them. And I thought, I want to see a water vole. So I went and sat down by the river. I walked along until I saw a little hole, and I sat down and I stared at the hole. And it must have only been about 10, 15 minutes. A water vole plopped out,
Wow,
plopped into the water, and went swimming along. And I was almost in tears. So I think that's
yeah.
pretty emotional. But um, just the fact that I had that, and I looked around and there was nobody there. It was just me and this water bowl, and I just have kept that forever. But sit down quietly in nature for 5 minutes. 20 minutes, half an hour is better, but that's a good way to start.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds amazing. It sounds beautiful. And it sounds like a lovely place to start to wrap up there,
Yeah.
Lindsey. But is there anything else that you feel is on your heart that you'd like to share with people today?
I think we've sort of covered it really, but yeah, just to reiterate that that nature's there for everyone, that it's open to everyone. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable visiting nature reserves, or think it's for sort of. I see, when I've had my binoculars on, the birders with binoculars, I'm going back to you. People say, "Oh, well, I'm not an expert, but are you looking at anything interesting?" It's like, it's nature. Everyone can look at it, and I want to help you see it. So,
yeah, I think that's what I find, that is actually generally people are quite a friendly lot, and actually when I often see, if I see someone else with binoculars, I'll be like, oh, have you seen anything today? And
yes.
and it's just having, but I think people, if they're not used to that environment, it can be a little bit intimidating, but actually not to worry about it, and just to, people are quite happy to share. I mean, I'm almost probably excited to come across someone else who's interested, and will happily share with you. So.
Have you ever seen something amazing and then been desperate to share it with other people? Like, we saw an otter. I've only seen an otter sort of handful of times in my life, but last summer we were watching an otter, and then people were walking past in the park and not noticing, so I was flagging them down, saying, "Have you seen this otter?" And most were really excited. There were some that were like, "Why are you telling me this?" I'm just want to go on my way. But nature's for everyone. I think that's the thing, really. And that if you've got big questions on your mind or thoughts, there's a thing in forest bathing called a medicine walk, and it all sounds very serious. You can go off with that intention in your mind, but I think just day to day, whether it's a question or a worry or something, it doesn't have to be a big sort of day-long trek. But if you go out into somewhere beautiful in nature, and with that thought on your mind, you may find that you get a bit of clarity, or a bit of a sign.
That's beautiful. That is just if you're feeling weighed down by sort of any decisions or anything in life, that it's a way of you lighten the load, and then you can almost, you get some clarity, don't you, of actually what could help.
I think so.
Oh, well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Lindsey. It's been just an absolute pleasure.
It's been lovely. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.